and we'll unmute you and we'll try to save them for the end. But if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Thank you. All right, welcome. Today we'll explore some of the announcements at Ignite concerning Azure, data, and security. For more information on today's program, make sure you check out the blog of the Book of News and the other useful links located at the end of the presentation. So with me today is Miguel Woods, who you probably recognize and you know he's our resident data savant and previous presenter here on topics like modernizing enterprise data analytics, enabling unified data governance across all your data sources with Azure Purview, modernizing data estate with Microsoft Enterprise Data Strategy and cost savings using Azure SQL hybrid benefits. I believe Miguel actually holds the most appearances here at YouAlreadyOwnIt. So congratulations, Miguel. Thanks for joining us again. And with us also is Karsten Du. He is the Planet Technologies Chief Enterprise Architect for Identity in Azure. And along with him, we have Andrew Gatzik, who specializes in all things Microsoft with a focus on security. His primary focus over the last 2 years has been dedicating to securing customer environments and investing his own personal time to keep up with all the frequent releases of security products with Microsoft. So you're in good hands today, folks. If you have any questions related to Azure data, infrastructure, security, please, this is your opportunity. These are some great resources to tap into. So welcome, folks. Welcome, speakers. Thanks for joining us today on the program. First up, before we get started, I would love to do a quick poll, just see who our customers are today. So if you could take 1 second and just let us know where you're coming from, what organization do you work for? That'd be great. Thank you. And we won't wait around for this. We'll just move right along. So let's quickly go over the agenda. We talked about this already. We're doing Azure data today. We're going to talk about Azure infrastructure and then security at the very end. And then we've got a couple of great announcements, so make sure you stick around for the end. One more poll. So, we want to know what you're mostly interested in today. Are you an Azure person, a data person, a security person? How can you be not all the above, right? But we're just kind of curious. What is your most interested topic today that you want to hear about? So the underlying theme at this year's Ignite was do more with less. It's a theme that certainly resonates here with the You Already Own It program. But during the kickoff session, we specifically heard these 5 major themes discussed. And today we will mostly talk about number 1, being data-driven and optimizing with Azure. And number 5, protect everything, everyone, and everywhere. So with these themes in mind, let's go ahead and start on our first topics, Azure Data Services and Azure Infrastructure. I believe Miguel is going to take us on a little tour of all the announcements for Azure Data Services, followed by Karsten. So Miguel, I'm really excited about some of these, specifically Power BI, but I'll go ahead and let you get started here, Miguel.
Fantastic. Yes, I know that we're focused on obviously Ignite, but we cannot ignore obviously the couple announcements that came out since Ignite, literally just a couple weeks ago, and we'll get into those. Yes, there seems to be a whole bunch of bullets, and I've broken these down into basically just the high levels of what I consider to be, and in the order in which I think them to be the most important to the most organizations out there from a data services perspective. And so let's go ahead and take a look at the Microsoft Intelligence Data Platform, which is the all up and all in. If you've heard me speak before and you already own it, you've heard me talk about the 3 pillars of the Microsoft Data Services or Azure Data Services. I would actually argue that's all of Microsoft, not just Azure, and that is the operational databases or the data platform, the core data platform, the analytics and intelligence, and I would argue that Power BI kind of falls in there as well. And then finally, data governance, enterprise data governance across wherever that data resides, whether it's Microsoft 365, whether it's on-prem, whether it's Azure, other clouds like AWS and Google Cloud, being able to govern all of our data no matter where it resides in that whole thing. One thing that obviously that Microsoft really focused in on Ignite was highlighting some of the partners that also interact or integrate very well and complement the core services that Microsoft provides. I would actually call out Prophecy from a master data management perspective in its integration with Purview, and obviously a couple others Click from a visualization perspective, and then obviously some of your industry standard databases that we typically deal with, MongoDB and UGBDB as well. So Informatica, obviously from an analytics perspective. Having said that, I'd like to drill into what I consider to be one of the biggest announcements that I've seen, at least in the analytics and intelligence space, which of course is Power BI. And that is that we now have the ability to have paginated reports in Power BI Pro, in the Power BI service. Now, we did have that capability before, but it did require us to look at Power BI premium licensing, whether that be a capacity per user, et cetera. That paginated reports is now available in Power BI Pro. This is a huge, huge announcement. So we've had clients that solely for the purpose of actually having paginated reports would actually have to up license up to the Power BI premium level. Will that be capacity per user? The other thing is, one of the biggest pain points for anyone adopting or that has adopted Power BI has been the migration, typically from the old, I want to say old, legacy visualization tooling of Microsoft SQL Server Reporting Services, or SSRS. So this announcement that I'm talking about was actually announced on November 14th, and then obviously SQL Server 2022 was released 2 days later. And what they included in that server release was a new migration tool to migrate SSRS reports and sources, data sources, over to Power BI. And so you're looking at both a screenshot of a paginated report on the left, as well as a screenshot of the 2022 migration tool from SSRS over to Power BI. One thing I want to make sure you understand is that even though this is only in 2022, currently Microsoft will be providing this this tool out to the previous versions of SQL Server 2017 and 2019. For those who've been around SSRS for a long time, 2016 was a huge rewrite of the entire SSRS platform in SQL Server, and so that's kind of why you see that also. 2016 is end of life already, or getting there as we actually move forward, SQL Server. Now, moving on, I would say the next thing is we have been using, and you can move to the next slide, Ken, if you don't mind.
I was going to say one more thing about Power BI, which I thought was really cool, which I think we mentioned on the episode 2 weeks ago, is about how Power BI Desktop is now going to be in the Office deployment package. So no more having to do separate deployments for Power BI Desktop. Everyone's going to have access to it because it's a free tool, right? It's the service that costs you money. But the Power BI Desktop used to be a headache for people deploying to the desktop. It was a separate desktop, needed admin privileges and everything else. It's going to be part of the Office deployment package coming forward. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that again, I think to your point, we announced that in our You Already Own It from the 2 weeks ago, but that's also significant there as well.
Yep.
So one of the things that we have, if you've been doing any type of data migrations, and again, this isn't for your initial data migration, this could be for your ongoing migrations as well, in moving your data workloads to Azure, we have initially it was a DMA, and obviously the DMA could feed Azure Migrate, but we also had the data migration service in Azure, the DMS in Azure. But Microsoft also has that Azure Data Studio and had the SQL migration extension within the Azure Data Studio to allow for us to very quickly migrate. And it would actually spin up everything for you, your DMS, the even point you to getting the Azure storage account that's necessary for that DMS to work properly. The announcement that was very big was that we have now a database migration assessment for Oracle as an extension to Azure Data Studio. And what I want to do is, first of all, if you're not familiar with extensions, remember this is actually added onto an Azure Data Studio. Yes, you can get it separately, but it's actually included in your current SSMS downloads, or SQL Server Management Studio. Remember, that is now separate. That's outside of SQL Server, and is currently in version 19 as well. But in this tool, and what I've done is I've got a couple slides, a couple screenshots on this, just to kind of walk that through. So this is what you would see if I wanted to go ahead and get that migration extension put in, and then notice what it does is it's actually assessing your Oracle database to either move it to Azure SQL, Azure SQL Managed Instance, and then not only does it specify that, but it also recommends and can scan, just like it does for the SQL migration extension, to provide recommended configurations or SKUs, sizing, for what you would need in your environment. If you take a look at the next screenshot that we have here, that is actually taking a look at what the summary of all those pieces. Now notice what it has is looking at the code objects, the storage objects, and the efficient. And what's even cool about this is you take a look at that feature compatibility score on the left-hand side that is giving you this, but it's also giving you an idea of what that workload, what type of work you'd have to do to translate that, if you will, or transform that Oracle workload into, in this example, Azure SQL Managed Instance. Again, we have several different targets there that are available from an Oracle perspective. Not only does it do that, so not only does it say, hey, it's complex, and hey, you're gonna have to re-architect 3 of those objects, so you've got total 7 of issues there. But on the next screenshot, it'll even start providing you estimates on the time that would take. Now, keep in mind, I'm talking about the new functionality here in Azure Data Studio. We still have our SSMA, or the SQL Server Migration Assistant for Oracle. But this is much more rich and provides more information. So I would actually argue that you probably want to start looking at this for that type of migration rather than looking at the SSMA tool, although it's still valid. One more slide on one more screenshot, I think, or 2 more. So this is when you actually start looking at the SKU recommendation. You can see it's business critical, probably from a read piece. It's telling you what the CPU requirement is. And then what the source that you're actually looking at is what was there as far as on the Oracle side as well. So you can see it's actually looking at 2 cores initially, or 2 CPUs, how much memory was actually allocated, et cetera, and what the OS and et cetera is there. So again, a complete assessment. And then of course the feature compatibility, if you'll hit the next screenshot, would actually go ahead and show that. So let's talk about the Azure Synapse Analytics. And again, think of Azure Synapse Analytics as that middle tier of analytics and intelligence, but the core piece. And remember, Azure Synapse Analytics includes many other things than what it initially began as simply Azure, as a rebranding of Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So now we're able to use from Azure Synapse, obviously, pipelines, which is that ADF engine for your data integration, et cetera. Having said that, one of the new features that we've actually have is in that pipeline for the Synapse pipelines, we have now a new pipeline template to bring in your Microsoft 365 data and mapping those data flows. Also, we have been asking for this for a long time in Azure Synapse Analytics is R language support. Typically, I'd have to go over to Databricks or something like that to do that. So with that, and typically we're doing that with machine learning, we have a new version of the Synapse ML, or machine learning module library, and that was previously called MML Spark. And that also, we also have the R language support, which is a huge thing for data scientists that are going to go ahead and move forward. On our next piece is something I'm passionate about. In fact, I was just working with this morning, and that's Microsoft Purview Data Governance. Now, while I'm here, I do want to make sure that everyone is aware that obviously in April, and I think we had YouAlreadyOwnIt that talked about this, that Microsoft took the Azure, previously called Azure Purview, which was the enterprise data governance, and put it under the Microsoft Purview brand, including all of the Microsoft 365 compliance functionality. That would be your auditing, your e-discovery, information protection, and put it under Microsoft Purview.
Yep.
So although that's a really good move to actually go ahead and put all of our governance and compliance under one big brand umbrella, it's also caused a little bit of confusion, to be honest, for clients. So keep in mind that Purview is really still currently 2 sides. Your Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal is the access point, or the entry point, for managing all your Microsoft 365 compliance pieces, and there's a lot more than that, obviously, on the Microsoft data governance side. That's in our Microsoft Purview Governance Portal, which is actually an Azure based app and an Azure based service. So licensing is completely different between the 2. As far as those data governance updates, specifically around data governance on the data governance side, we now have the ability to actually get dynamic lineage in Power BI data sets, and even fine grained. So I can take a look at data set in Power BI, and I can see exactly where it's coming from in any of my data sources, specifically around SQL platform, whatever that may be. The meta models that we see second, that will enable customers to basically define and actually break down even more, or organize more, our organization, departments, and data domains. One of the things we didn't see that initially with the Azure Purview release. And that came further on, but now we're even seeing meta models now rather than just the data models we see. But the last one is machine learning based classifications. Remember, our classifications are typically done by a scanning engine and based on our classification rule sets that we actually create in Microsoft Purview Data Governance. And so this is actually going to help. To give an example here, we'll make detection of human names and addresses much better. You will see more machine learning capabilities come into your scanning capabilities and classifications as well later on. Go ahead, Ken.
That was another theme at Ignite, right? Using AI.
Yes.
Across all the workloads. Yeah.
Yep. So I actually combined a couple things here, and I've only a couple more slides here, guys. So don't worry about that. So Azure Data Explorer, again, sometimes you'll see that referred to as ADX. We have new sources. And this has been a big ask for a while, is having S3 support as a source within Azure Data Explorer within Azure Synapse. We also have a Synapse link, a new Synapse link for Azure Cosmos DB. So that makes available the ability to get into that table storage, open telemetry, and stream analytics output as well from ADX, and then streaming ingestion for the Telegraph agent output. From a Azure Data Factory perspective, we have a new SAP Change Data Connector that is significant in that, again, it allows for us to ingest data from different SAP data sources, SAP HANA, SAP Cloud for customers, among others, and then combine them with data from other operational stores like Azure Cosmos DB or the Azure SQL Factory to go ahead and bring that in as well. Next slide, and the last slide really as far as just making sure we had some other, and I call them Azure industry-based databases. So the Cosmos DB, first of all, we now have is adding the Citus engine, which is basically distributed PostgreSQL support, and that means we also have the ability to have the MongoDB developers can now store up to 16 megabyte documents in Cosmos. Azure Database for Postgres is adding encryption support for data at rest with customer managed keys. Remember, obviously our data is always encrypted by Microsoft by default, but now we have the customer managed key support from Azure Database for PostgreSQL. And finally, last but not least, Azure Database for MySQL, again for the LAMP stacks, of course, adding the autoscale IO functionality as well. So there are, yes, and I'm glad, Andrew's actually mentioning that from a security perspective. I know that I'm going to be passing that off for Andrew for the security, that we do have security baseline templates for ADX, Data Factory, and Data Share as well. Data Share being one of those things that was announced prior to. So that kind of wraps up the data. I definitely, if there are any questions, do place them in there. I'll be watching the chat as well, but Ken, back to you.
So yeah, some awesome updates there. So back to some good news for Oracle users, right? So if Oracle folks wanted to get into Azure and have a PaaS solution, it looks like it's coming, right?
Yes, yeah, and you're
able to use the managed instances, and
that's right.
Get that easy migration tool. Well, I wouldn't say easy probably, but migration tool to Oracle.
And I wanted to call that out because even the sample screenshots that I was actually showing for that Azure Data Studio, you'll notice not one single Oracle. It wasn't a simple thing. There was actually some type of work you had to do if you were taking a look at that, that you had to do. Whether it was a re-architecting, whether it was actually complex modifications, there is still work to do. I do believe, and I will tell you from everything I've done, and I've played with it already a couple of times now, is looking at it compared to the SSMA for Oracle, which was really our previous Microsoft go-to tool for migrating. It is much more robust and provides much more information into that migration.
Awesome. So some good news there. Thanks, Miguel. I hope you join us again in a little bit here on our roundtable. So
of course, I'll be here. Stand by.
Stick around, please. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's move over to Karsten now. Karsten's going to talk a little bit about some Azure infrastructure updates. So Karsten, go ahead and take it away.
Hey, thank you, Ken. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. So from the Ignite, there was a lot of infrastructure updates. I picked out a couple that I think they are quite significant. So let's start with Azure Auto Manage. So Auto Manage let you configure and manage servers at scale in Azure. And this is true for both Arc-enabled servers as well as our Azure virtual machines. And what Auto Manage let us configure are participating services across supported server versions in Azure. And these range from Server 2012 R2 up to 2022 Azure Edition. Windows 10 is also included here. There's a long list of services that we can auto-provision using auto-manage for services. It goes from monitoring, backup, Defender for Cloud, malware, update management, change tracking and inventory, machine configuration, boot diagnostics, Windows Admin Center, automation accounts, and log analytic workspaces. So needless to say, these before auto-manage was topics that you had to deal with either in blueprints or Terraform or manually configuration. So it's a huge addition to manage your environment at scale. From a monitor,
I see Azure Arc mentioned there. So that means, outside of Azure itself, like possibly AWS or Google Cloud, right? So this would work with those as well.
All clouds and also on-prem servers can be managed also using auto-manage, again, for participating services.
Sure.
Yeah. Azure Monitor, there's a lot of little small details that are constantly improving with Azure Monitor. The big one is there is a new monitoring agent out there. And why that is significant is that it takes multiple agents, such as MMA or Log Analytics agent or OMS agent, and consolidate all of these agents into a singular Azure monitoring agent, now called AMA. It comes with several benefits around security and performance. There is cost savings because now we can collect data using data collection rules. So we can be a little bit more picky for what data we do want to collect. In other words, we can reduce the data, the amount of data we are collecting using Azure Monitor. We get simplified management because of the data collection and the data collection rules. And we can also centralize the agent configuration, making it much simpler to target all our various environments throughout our cloud. I think the latest thing here, also important to understand, the AMA agent, so the Azure Monitor agent, does not replace the other agents. So there is a migration that needs to take place. So we need to deploy the AMA agent, and then we need to roll off the other agents, whatever was used before. I think, Ken, it's safe to say we will post something around that migration in LinkedIn and on our own web pages here. I think that's a good little pointer for our customer to have some insight around.
Yeah, maybe we should we'll put it in the newsletter next month or whenever it comes out, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand. It's certainly something you should plan for before you start going there. Deploying the new agent, that's perfectly fine. They can live side by side. That's not a problem. So if you want to start playing with it, go for it. All right, the last topic on my little slide here, just mentioning this out of Ignite was the news about Azure Savings Plan. I think a lot of us had to read this a couple of times before it finally stuck with us. We used to have the ability of operating with reserved instances in Azure. And with reserved instances, you have to create a pool. In other words, you pick a quantity. And then once you pick a quantity, you pick a SKU and a region. Once you do that, you can get great savings on the compute cost. This is only for compute cost. Does not impact any licensing or applicable licensing cost. With Savings Plan, now you are committing to a dollar amount and you get savings on compute for servers you include in the savings plan. Now you are free to choose between SKUs. SKUs can come and go, and you're also not limited to regions. Those are really the big differences there.
So reserved instances were only available in certain regions. Is that what you're saying, Carson?
Your pool is region specific. So
Gotcha.
if you're present in multiple regions, you actually have to have multiple pools.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's really the big difference there.
Okay.
All right. So feel free, same as Miguel. Feel free if you have any questions, just post it here or contact us. We will get back to you on any answers. So back to you, Ken.
Thanks, Carson. Hope you'll join us again in a few minutes for the roundtable. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
All right, Mr. Andrew, you're up, my friend. Talk to us about security updates. I think a lot of folks are interested, at least from the survey, about 29%, maybe even more, probably about 30% or more people are interested in security. So let's hear about it.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Thanks everybody for taking some time out to kind of hang out with us today. There's a pretty big focus on security from the Microsoft perspective. They're going 100 miles an hour with releasing all sorts of different security technologies, services, products, you name it, they've got it coming at us full speed. Here I'm only going to focus on a few of these specifically. You're more than welcome to kind of jump into any of these that may look appealing to you. But yeah, so let's jump to the next slide, please. So Defender for Cloud. There's a ton of development going on around Defender for Cloud. You can see here, we have Defender for DevOps. So that's a fairly new announcement that came with Ignite. So this is basically allowing you to kind of tie into GitHub or Azure DevOps, and kind of manage the code repositories there and look for vulnerabilities, secrets, and so forth that may be exposed within those repos. The agentless scanning here. So agentless scanning is pretty big, right? So now we can reach out to AWS and Azure and perform those scans without the need to go out and push an agent, right? So save us all a little bit of time, less resources utilized, to actually run the agent from on the specific VM and so forth. So this will still provide visibility into software, CVEs and so forth. So pretty big. And then again, back to the third bullet here, the agentless scanning for ECRs, right? So containers on AWS. That's pretty big. Also, they also have full integration now to containers over that may live over on the Google side of the house, right? So we can now protect containers that live in GCP with Defender for Containers. So multi-cloud capabilities, pretty nice. So again, Defender for Cloud primarily, came out of the gate providing, that CSPM functionality to give us visibility, into what's going on in our environment, right? So we still have all the recommendations and so forth from everything that Defender for Cloud can see. And again, that can be, multi-cloud, on-premise if it's being brought in via Azure Arc and so forth. So here, this is a pretty big one here, especially from the security perspective, right? So attack path analysis. So attack path analysis is great, and as you can, basically, if you take a step back, so what is required for attack path analysis to function? Defender for Cloud is now has what we're calling the cloud security graph, and this cloud security graph is collecting the data from your environments and your data sources. It's looking at your assets, connections, internet exposure, permissions, and so forth. And then it's that security graph is building a representation of your environment in the background. So once we have that built, now we move to attack path analysis. Attack path analysis is taking the information from the cloud security graph to, to present us with potential paths an attacker could possibly use to breach our environment, right? Which is huge, right? So this is showing us where we have exploitable paths in our environment. And what it's going to do, as you can see here, is it's going to, if you drill down into it, it's going to take it, step by step, through a potential remediation process, right? It will also rank this in criticality, so we can kind of, look at those critical assets first. But you can imagine how big of a deal this is, right? So this is helping us get out and identify, those exploits that an attacker could use before they've actually, compromised the machine or the resource. So pretty big. If we take the next step from, if you move past attack path analysis, the next natural step is external attack surface management. And I don't think I have a slide here for that, but external attack surface management is also going to be really big, right, from a security perspective, because what this is going to do is this is going to give our customers an outside in view on their security. So we're always, we've always been worried on the inside out. Now Microsoft is giving us the capabilities to look from the outside in via publicly exposed assets. So this is going to look at anything that's exposed to the internet. This is going to really help us kind of paint that picture, and prioritize the risks, eliminate threats, and so on, but from the outside in. So it's pretty interesting. We can move on. This one here, this was an announcement, not necessarily too big, but I did want to mention it, right? Since we are a Microsoft partner, it's kind of part of our job is to always keep our ears open, and look for opportunities to upsell a customer. This one, is a great one of those opportunities, right? So, if we have a customer that's thinking about it, going to MDE, right? This may be the decision maker for them. So this is a 50% discount, right? So this is P1, P2. As you can see here, some of these bundles are not eligible for obvious reasons, right? So E5 already got P2 and so on and so forth. Does not cover, Defender for Business, which I personally haven't seen a whole lot of Defender for Business, but I know some of our team members have worked with Defender for Business, and that's generally your kind of 300 or less licensing. So pretty good thing to throw out to a customer to help push them into, help them with that decision-making process. And Microsoft will like plan it a little bit more if we can drive more, licenses and consumption and so forth. So M365D, right? So this is, again, Microsoft taking actions for us, right? So this attack disruption, this is, on the back end, Microsoft, obviously, they have access to all of our data, so it naturally makes sense for them to collect, and correlate those signals for us, and then do their due diligence in assisting us in detecting, an in progress attack or something that may be coming our direction that we may not have already caught with, Defender 3, MDO or MDE or Sentinel or something along those lines. So pretty interesting as well. This kind of I don't know if you're familiar with Dex hunting, but Microsoft also has something that's called Dex hunting. I think it's $5, $6, $7 per user, and that's actually a human, on a threat analyst, not machine learning, not Sentinel, not MDE, not MDO. It's an actual human that is looking, at our data from a threat through the threat lens, right? So, also, more along the lines of how Microsoft is, helping us, try to better secure our identity, our assets, and so forth.
All right, talk to us a little bit about Entra. We did it, in case you missed it, about 2 months ago, I believe, Karsten. I can't remember when it was. You did a whole hour long. You already own it on this one. So we have the link at the end if you want to see some more about Microsoft Entra. So go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, so that was good that Karsten got in front of everybody with Intra, because I didn't have to do it. So Karsten, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. I hope it was stellar delivery, as I'm sure it was. So Intra, it's kind of like Purview, right? So they, Purview now encompasses multiple areas, and that's what they've done with Intra. So Intra has got three main pillars. You have Azure Active Directory, you've got permissions management, and you've got verified ID. So the most useful and the most utilized and the most consumed pillar of the three, to my knowledge, is going to be the Azure Active Directory. So within that pillar of Azure Active Directory, we start looking at our identity. Back in the day, network, and that's the kind of like your boundary, right? So now the identity is mostly what we're looking to target and to protect, because that's going to then help assist in protecting, preventing access to our data, right? So we've got the kind of from identity governance perspective, you've got the identity life cycle, the access life cycle, and then you've got your secure the privilege, right? So the identity life cycle is just that, right? It's ensuring the right people have the correct access to the resources that they need. And then it also helps us answer the questions, of how should access change over time, right? So that could be, a change in duties, and employment status, job role, and so on and so forth. So, this gives us, kind of that governance at scale, once that we've set this up properly, and it really, reduces some of the overhead associated with permissions and access and security from an identity perspective. So it's really, really, really good stuff here. So the next one is going to be, access, right? So we've got the identity. Now we're going to look at the access. And what this is going to do is just come back and look at the access that the user has after that user account was initially provisioned, right? Do they still need that same access? Do they need access to other resources, and so on and so forth? And then we can automate this via workflows. So workflows is really really awesome tool, right? So this is where we can add users to groups and provide them access to applications and resources, and so on and so forth, based on some predetermined condition assigned to that identity. So that's the idea behind the workflows. And then we move to the next one, which is kind of like our privileged access lifecycle. Again, same as with your standard user, right? Except we're looking at privileged accounts and how we're going to kind of help protect those privileged accounts is PIM. I think we're all pretty familiar with PIM, so privileged identity management, right? So the same thing. So it's all about protecting especially those privileged accounts, right? And access reviews, entitlement management, everything goes into this Intra umbrella. So I think Microsoft looks at what I think that they call it joiner, movers, and leavers, right? So those are kind of the three high level ways Microsoft identifies the users within the organization. So when a user joins the org, you tag that user with whatever that specific tag may be. That tag will give them access to everything that they should need to perform their role. If that user moves within the organization and takes on a new role, we remove the tag, add the tag, permissions are removed, the new permissions are granted. And then the leaver, of course, is when they leave, right? So once they leave, we remove that tag. That account is disabled. That account is moved out for probably compliance purposes. We can keep a hold of it. We have access to it, but it's really the whole lifecycle management as a whole is really what we want to work to get better at.
Yeah. So some exciting stuff coming to Identity. This is in preview now. Very excited about this. I'm looking forward to go to general availability. I'm not sure exactly when. Do you know when that is by any chance, Andrew or Carson? I can't remember. It's probably we probably mentioned it during the
What was that
session. When it goes to general availability, do we know estimations? I'm not sure if we've heard that yet.
I think it is. I'll
Okay.
double check. It's
All
just
right.
like permissions management is now,
Yeah.
in GA. So all of the work that, Microsoft kind of teased us, right? They're like, hey, here's permissions management. We just bought Cloud Knox. You guys go have fun with this. What
Right.
they didn't tell us at that point in time was all of that work that you put into it is now for nothing because now you're moving to the paid service and everything that you've done before is now irrelevant. You have to go and recreate everything.
Yeah. So big item here. It's becoming more mature, ready to start taking a serious look at. And again, yeah, definitely take a look at Karsten's deep dive that we did, the hour-long session, You Already Own It session about 2 months ago. We have a link at the end of this session here. So thanks, Andrew, for wrapping us up on the Entra updates there. So at this point, if there's any questions, please let us know. Put them in the chat link or raise your hand so we can unmute you. What I'd like to do though is ask, Andrew, Miguel, Karsten, prediction for next year. What do you think folks are going to be, paying attention to? What do you think is going to, anything big news that you think is going to come out or be available next year in the world of Azure?
I'm gonna steal this soapbox moment here, Ken.
Yeah.
I think this presentation today, we're talking about Azure infrastructure, we're talking about security, and we're talking about data.
Yeah.
And if you look at what's happening out there in the IT industry, everyone is talking about zero trust. It's a really hot buzzword out there.
Sure.
And then let's think about what that means and where it's coming from. So it means always verify, assume breach, and align to a broader security strategy.
Yep.
And it's coming from a lot of industries, many verticals, and of course, government and data protection requirements. And that's kind of the reason I call it a soapbox moment there. I put the word data in there because very often we leave data out of our planning, out of our IT strategy, visionary meetings and whatnot. So to me, zero trust also means getting to a complete state of governance. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to use an example here. For example, hub-spoke networking. So we have been pushing this for years, and now we're seeing that there's new things coming around networking, hub-spoke networking. So Microsoft is putting automation around virtual spokes. Why do they do that? It helps us simplify its management. It helps us create automated routing. Now, why is that significant? Because it provides governance. It gives us control, and it also gives us transparency or visibility. So we often see when we talk to customers that they ask for control without understanding how to form governance. And control and governance isn't necessarily the same. The governance, in my mind, and in our preaches to the customer, is that governance is something. It's a more holistic hat that you put on, and this is where we need to step back to the start and kind of step back and get the bird's eye view on environment or environments. If they're connected, we need to look at everything. Some of the subtopics when we talk about governance is tenancy governance and control, identity governance, rules and control. Andrew just talked about Microsoft Entra, right? Subscription governance, access control and guardrails, infrastructure, network, security, policy, compliance, and security governance. So we hear customer wants security, but you also need security governance. Like you need to monitor your monitoring. You need to have visibility. So all of this ties up to a larger or a broader strategy that you now can start calling governance. And I think, needless to say, maybe, but I'm going to say it anyway, you can't just build in tiny little silos and, for example, create governance for one application or one service. That's actually quite often an ask.
Yeah, we see it all the time, Karsten. We get customers who are like, I want to put this app up in Azure, and maybe they haven't even thought about like a whole enterprise 25,000-foot view of how Azure should be set up to begin with. They just want to get their app up there and get started. And you really need to take that step back so that you don't cause yourself problems later and you don't have security issues, right?
Yeah.
So having that 25,000-foot set of governance across all those things, networking, security, infrastructure, subscription governance, identity governance, we're seeing Microsoft fill those holes for us and give us those tools and capabilities from what I'm seeing.
Yep.
What I see is coming forward here.
And to draw the full cycle here, since I mentioned this was a soapbox moment here, governance is good. Governance around everything that I talked about, tenancy, identity, subscription infrastructure, security. It's great. But it's not great until we also include data governance. And this is where I'm going to hand it over to Miguel again to
we're starting to see customers ask us about data governance.
Drive it home here.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm literally coming off of a data governance call with a client, and I can't stress that enough. And I think we have a situation with a lot of clients that they don't consider the all up and all in. The Microsoft 365, our application platform, that provides a whole bunch of data. Yes, it's primarily email, OneDrive, Teams, SharePoint, but that actually data still needs to be governed, and arguably it needs to be governed the same way you govern your data sources that would be your classic or your what everyone thinks of as data governance as far as databases, your SaaS applications, etc.
Yeah.
I will tell you to what Karsten said, we do see that quite a bit where a client says, hey, I'm deploying this workload, this app platform, data application up into Azure, and I need to have this type of governance around just that.
That's right.
Well, that's great. But later on, one way or another, you will actually end up doing the data governance. And I'm not suggesting that you need to spend a whole bunch of time up front, but simply understanding what you want long-term from a governance perspective of everything that you have. Because arguably all we do in IT is we're managing data. Where that data resides and how that data resides is it doesn't matter, in my opinion. It matters of how we're managing the whole thing. How are we actually doing? And again, I like governance is such a gray area. When you first start talking, people think, oh, well, I'm worrying about security. I'm worrying about understanding what that is. If you don't have that holistic view, which is critical up front, I think that can make you pay some heavy workloads later on that you may not you could have actually saved by doing just a little bit here and there as you're actually moving this forward.
Absolutely, Miguel. Thank you for those words. I agree 100%. Again, we have lots of archive video and blogs on Miguel's governance and Entra, so please make sure you take a look at those. Because we're running a little bit short on time and we got a couple big announcement from Casey coming up here. I want to make sure we save enough time for Casey to talk about what he needs to. So we're just going to wrap up with one more poll question. So when you get a chance, please take this poll. We're kind of interested in hear what you thought was useful today. And then I'm going to just show you all the past recordings and blogs that we've written on this topic today of Azure infrastructure, data, and security. So definitely take a look at these. This is not all the blogs, obviously. You should have a link in your newsletter of all the blogs and recordings. These are just the ones about those 3 topics that we talked about today. So definitely take a look at those. As always, as a reminder, your YouAlreadyOwnIt benefits are included. So please make sure you schedule some time with us to take advantage of some of these benefits. We'll be happy to work with you on those. And with that, I'm going to ask if there's any questions. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat window. While we're waiting for questions, though, let's go ahead and turn it over to Casey with some big news that he's got for us.
Thanks, Ken. And hope everyone enjoyed today's session. We are very excited to continue to grow and invest in the program, and we are announcing today the availability of 2 new member benefits. The first session is an Azure rationalization workshop designed to help you get a clear picture of your Azure consumption and optimize your Azure spend. This is intended for members that are already consuming Azure services, and you'll receive usage summary reports, Azure capabilities reviews, and cost benefit analysis of deploying additional resources. And then we are also introducing an Accelerate M365 adoption workshop, because we know to realize the value of your M365 suite, you need more than just deployment. You need a strategy to drive user adoption. So in this workshop, you'll learn how to assess where your users are, as well as best practices to drive and sustain adoption of your M365 services. If you are interested in scheduling these or need more information, please reach out to our membership coordinator, Michelle McGraw. Her email address is listed there on the screen, or send an email to YouAlreadyOwnIt at go-planet.com. That's it for me, Ken. Thank you very much.
Some 2 new early Christmas gifts. I'm pretty excited about these 2. They're things I think that our customers could definitely use, as well as, the data modernization, the secure score, all the things that were on that previous slide. So definitely take a look at all these benefits. No cost to you. Would love to sit down with you and spend a little bit of time with these benefits. One last poll question. If we could bother you with one last poll question, we would love to hear what topics are most interest to you that you want us to cover next year. Please select, I believe this is probably a multiple choice, right? So as many, you can probably select as many as you want. So yeah, let us know what you want. I don't know, is there another? I'd love to know if there's something that's not listed here, please feel free to put it in the chat window. We'll be happy to take a look at that. As always, we look forward to these ongoing sessions. On behalf of Planet Technologies, obviously, we thank you for joining us today. We really value our relationship. We wish you a happy holiday and a healthy and prosperous new year. Let me check for chat questions one more time. Don't see any questions, but we'll stick around for a few minutes. If you have any questions, by all means, please put them in the chat window. Happy to do that. Happy holidays, folks. Thanks for joining us. And make sure you reserve the date. January 26th. Topic is to be determined based on user feedback. So let's hear from you, folks. Let's hear what's of interest to you all. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great day.